The Walking Dead Season 8, Episode 9, Honor. So, of course, this is the mid season premiere, and it is officially the end of Carl Grimes. There's an interesting episode going into it. It's one of the really big shocks of the series. Even as a comic reader, this isn't something that's happened in the comics. At least not as far as I know. I'm not caught up just yet. But as far as I'm concerned, that was a big surprise. I was like, huh, that's not what I was expecting. I was curious how things were going to play out, but it was a pretty good episode. As far as the Carl stuff, it's sad and depressing. Admittedly, I wasn't like that torn up about it. It just sucked that he was gone, but I wasn't like devastatingly sad. I was kind of like doing other stuff, and I was just like, that sucks. Somebody else is dead. It should have more of an impact, but admittedly, especially having gone through the comics where you just read stuff and it's like, dang, I just didn't see that coming. It's kind of like I'm so used to it happening like with the show as well as the comics all together. It's like, even with it being Carl, it's almost just like, man, that just sucks. Moving on. So, pretty crazy, but they did some really good stuff in this episode. Some stuff that I was super curious about because they teased it at the very beginning of this season with old Rick, we'll call it gray hair and everything. And I was like, all right, with the way they're doing it, it can't be like the comic books. It has to be, especially with him having like full gray hair and all that stuff. I'm like, this has to skip a couple of years. Like it can't be a few months and then suddenly he goes from like a little bit of gray hair to just full gray with the whole beard and everything. I was like, it's got to be some time, and they show that it's quite a few years. Actually, they skip a couple of years. He's unfortunately has one kid, but she's grown up. She's talking and running around. The hilltop, she's talking to everybody, so we get to see some of the people that are still left alive, which they did something. I was curious if they were going to do it, and I was like, all right, obviously they changed things up in very big ways on the show compared to the comics, obviously killing Carl. But I was like, all right, there's a thing that I knew that obviously I didn't want to spoil with Negan, and I was like, I wonder if they're going to keep that. I wonder if they're going to keep that around for the series or if they're going to change that up and kind of just, kill him off. And they show by the end of this episode that Negan is going to be sticking around, that he is going to be helping him out as one of the heroes. And I was like, well, that is very interesting. And it also makes me wonder, with the way they showed it, where it was like, oh, he's just walking around. There's some other elements I still can't spoil. But I was like, I wonder if this is like kind of way down the line after the next arc or something, if that's how they're going to play it. Because just from the little bit that I know after this arc, it's like, okay, it's not like an instantaneous thing where Negan just kind of comes back in and is just like, all right, it's cool, no big deal. Obviously, with him being the character he is, takes some time. So it makes me wonder if what we're getting in these flash forwards are even past, they're even beyond the next arc that we're actually going to get. So curious how that's going to play out. Like I said, it's solely based on him kind of just being free and in the area. I was like, I wonder exactly how far ahead this is as far as what the characters deal with. But that was a nice little revelation. I knew it was going to happen, or at least I knew it from the comics. So I was like, like I said, it was still that question of, is that something they're going to keep or are they going to change it? I'm sure a lot of people were kind of losing their minds, like, what in the world is going on there? It's one of those weird things where, I mean, you see he's alive, obviously, so it's just like, for me as a comic reader, it was one of those situations where I think I don't know if it's the majority or not, but I'm kind of in the camp of, I kind of didn't like how that played out. It's definitely interesting because it's like, holy crap, Negan as this crazy villain that he is, he becomes a part of the group. So it's definitely an interesting story dynamic that you don't see very often, especially when characters get like to that level of villainy. But still, it was just kind of it's not that it happened, it's the very specific scene, and some of the I'm trying to think of how to say all that. Some of the results, some of the stuff that they show in that flash forward are strictly because of Negan not being killed off, and it was one of those things where I was just like, that just kind of annoys me that certain characters are doing this. So we'll see if they change that up just a little bit, but we'll just ultimately have to wait and see how that plays out. But I thought that was cool. They do show that it's a couple of years later. It's not just like a couple of months like in the comics. So it's years down the line. Everyone's kind of doing great, and they're at the hilltop and everything, and there's gonna be dessert and growing food, stuff like that. And then of course, in the modern day, we have everything going on with Rick and his pain and suffering of losing Carl, and he and Michonne dealing with that together. Everyone else kind of heading off to the hilltop to give them their moment, and then we have the kingdom where Ezekiel is with I totally don't remember that guy's name, but they have their back and forth, and then you have Morgan and Carol going to rescue Ezekiel, and then they have like the one kid who really wanted to go with Carol, but she of course said no, and he ends up there by the end of the episode anyway, basically getting revenge for his brother. But I like that segment. That was definitely, obviously that was like the action segment of the episode. But I was also curious how it was going to play out because they did something pretty cool that I wasn't expecting by the end, where they have Carl go back seasons when they're at the prison and he killed that kid. And if I remember right, he did that in front of and I can't even remember his name, but Maggie's dad. If I remember right, that's who he killed that kid in front of. He did it in front of somebody else, and he talks about that with Rick, where it's like, he was putting his gun down, but I killed him anyway. And then he kind of relates that to Rick kind of putting his weapons down and how things kind of worked in certain cases at least. But while Carl was telling that story, they were cutting to Morgan, where he's in this weird in between where it's like, the guys he was saying, it's like, you killed all these guys just for that one kid. And I was like, it's interesting. And it's like, let's see where this goes. But I thought that was cool. I was like, all right, I didn't expect them to kind of have Carl tell that story, and it ties into what Morgan's dealing with right now and how he's changed and changing. So I was like, it was kind of cool. I wasn't expecting them to do that, but I like how they handled it. And he was gonna do it until the young boy actually ended up killing him. So I was like, oh, okay, he's in that change, where Carl was at that point. But I thought it was definitely an interesting storyline, and I'm curious how that's gonna go forward because it's like these three adults watching this little kid, kill somebody, and it's like that's not what we wanted, for Morgan. Like, Carol and Ezekiel were like, we don't want that for this grown adult. Of course, they didn't want it for this little kid. So I am curious how that might affect kind of that little quartet, I guess, of characters going forward. But I thought that was cool, just the way that whole storyline kind of played out. And then, like I said, of course, the Rick stuff, Carl, dying naturally was sad. And then, our flash forwards I thought were pretty cool, showing like, this person lives, this is what's happening here. And I was like, all right, I think that's a pretty cool idea to kind of show it this way, because that's not something they do in the comics. It's just, natural progression. I actually really like the way they do it, especially if you haven't read the comics, but even reading it, I was like, this is actually kind of a cool way to do it, where they're jumping, through time. And even at the end of this episode, they show Rick sitting by that tree, the part where he's like crying and talking. And even that, I was like, okay, so that's still not the mid-season premiere. That's what I thought that was going to be. And that's still somewhere else, because he was not at Alexandria. He was sitting by, at least it looked like he was sitting by a random tree to me. And it looked like, there were like glass panes like hanging off the tree, one on each side. I was like, okay, that doesn't look like it's in Alexandria. That doesn't look like it's specifically tied to what just happened with Carl, because he dies, in the house, and they bury him. And that could have been, what that was. That was him, sitting by the tree. But I thought that was interesting. I was like, it just looks like it's a totally different place. So it's those kind of 3 points with the beginning of the season, and then this being the mid-season premiere and how they did the mid-season finale, and then still going forward to the actual finale and what'll basically be like the epilogue, depending on how much we get to see. I'm super curious if they'll, because this was just like, here's these little clips, and they kept showing more and more, and then they show Negan by the end. So it definitely makes me wonder if they're gonna keep doing that going forward. And it's like, oh well, we haven't seen this person yet. Are they gonna live? Are they gonna die? I think that would be a cool way to kind of play up the second half of the season, where they keep showing more and more of the future, but it's still just like, oh, this person doesn't happen to be here, or this person isn't there. And especially if they start to go to some of the other locations during this time jump, I think that would be a cool way to kind of add mystery to, like, where's this person at? What's happening with them? What's happening there? So I think that would be cool if we get that. Even if we don't, I am excited to see how things are about to play out going forward. I think they may have kind of spoiled it just a little for people, because like I said, I kind of knew with the comic, but I don't know how people are really going to react with the whole Negan thing, because now it's like, okay, well, once you know a character's going to live, tension's gone, especially when it's the main villain. Granted, it brings up the crazy question of why the F is the villain alive and stuff like that, so it might be good, but I'm just really curious, especially with Negan as a character, how some people kind of like him as a villain, how some people may not like him so much as a villain. So I am curious how that's going to play out. I haven't looked anything up online yet just to see kind of where people are right now, but I'm curious what people are thinking. Like, what the consensus is like, is this cool? Is this crappy? Like, what the F does it mean? So I am looking forward to checking that out online. That's definitely going to be one of the highlights of just this episode even existing, is like, what does everyone else think about the whole Negan thing? But all in all, I thought it was a decent episode. I am definitely looking forward to things, kind of kicking up and getting back to the action. Immediately, like I said, with the Carl thing, I knew it was just going to be that type of episode where it's like the whole thing is just going to be focused on this character dying, and it's a huge, character and stuff like that. So that, it was pretty much exactly what I was expecting. So I wasn't like super crazy about it, admittedly, because it was just like I knew what this was going to be, and it didn't even really get played up. It wasn't like they had it with everyone, basically like Daryl. It's like, all right, like you saved all these people, and then they're out, and then it's just three characters pretty much through the rest of that storyline. It was like, oh, they didn't even do like the normal thing where it's like every character comes in, like we had this and we had that. It was just like, no, just these three characters, and then it cuts to the other storylines, and it was like, oh, that's even less than most other shows get, where it's everybody's like celebrating the life of this main character sort of thing. But all in all, like I said, it's still a decent episode. Of course, we'd love to know what you guys thought about it, so please comment below. Let me know your favorite parts about it, least favorite parts about it. Naturally, it is official. I figured it was gonna happen. I mean, I guess some people thought Carl might somehow survive. I'm like, I knew he was gonna die. So of course I want to know what you guys are feeling right now, how you feel about Carl being dead and what that's going to do going forward, your predictions, especially if you're a comic reader, how that's going to change some things. There's definitely a storyline I was curious. I was like, well, how are they going to do that? Like, especially with the actor being older, it kind of would have worked a little bit better. I'm assuming that's just all going to be cut. Otherwise, it's going to be even weirder than it was in the comics, because the only character they can use now would be even younger. So I would hope they won't do that. But I would love to know how you guys are feeling about, where we are right now. Definitely want to know how you guys feel about the reveal of Negan at the end, if you were not expecting that. If you were a comic reader, are you excited that they kept that kind of going forward and what we should expect from that? Or are you not so excited? Like I said, I'm like right in the middle. If they change the exact circumstance, I'll be happy. Because that was like the one thing where I was just like, I get it, but at the same time, it's like sometimes I feel characters are just too much of the archetype that they're meant to be. Sometimes I feel like they're too much of that archetype, and that was one of those moments in the comics where I was just like, that's just too much. That felt like it was just a little too far to me, and I just did not like it in that very specific moment. But we'd love to know what you guys are thinking about it and what you thought about this episode in general. So please comment below, let me know, and thanks for watching.